بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. أما بعد، فأهلا وسهلا ومرحبا بكم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. أما بعد. Welcome to part 2 of the ahkam pertaining to the Ihrām. And in this session, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, we are going to discuss the violations of the Ihrām specific to the men. The violations of the Ihrām specific to the men. In part 1, we took the violations of the Ihrām that were specific to both men and women. And now in part 2, we are going to discuss the violations of the Ihrām specific to the men, meaning that they apply to the men and do not apply to women. The first violation, as it pertains to the Ihrām, that is specific to the men, is the covering of the head. And this is due to the saying of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam regarding the companion radiyallahu anhu who died in Ihrām. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Wash him with water and sidr, then shroud him in his garment, and do not cover his head." Collected by Al-Bukhari and Muslim. And so this companion died in the state of Ihrām, and so his head was not covered when being prepared for the burial. So this forbiddance here means that a man may not cover his head in the state of Ihrām, meaning by something that physically touches his head and covers his head, such as a cap, meaning a baseball cap, or any other type of hat. Also the kufi, as I'm wearing here, is not permissible. Also the ghutra, which is what you find many wearing, the white garment over the head that is popular in the Khalij, in the Gulf areas, that the men wear over their kufis. Also the shimar, which is the red one that you'll find very popular, for example, in Saudi Arabia and other countries in the Gulf. Even a hood. So if you're wearing a thobe that has a hood, or even if you have a hoodie, which we'll get into, that you won't even be able to wear, but anything with a hood, you aren't allowed to wear. Likewise, a turban, you're not allowed to wear. So covering of the head with one of these types of things is not permissible for the man while in the state of Ihrām. As for that which does not touch the head, however covers the head, meaning is above the head, but does not come in contact with the head, then such as an umbrella, so for the shade, for example, or for rain, or a tent. So if you are inside a tent and your head is underneath a tent, or the ceiling of a room, or the roof of a car, or a bus, or a train, then all of that is fine, and that is not what is meant by covering of the head. And the proof of that it's permissible, is that during Hajj, some of the companions were with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and just to summarize, that a garment was raised over his head while he was in the state of Ihrām, shading him from the sun. So that is the proof that it is permissible to be covered by something yani covering your head, meaning covering that does not come in contact with your head. However, anything that does come in contact with your head to cover your head is not permissible. Other than that, also are things that may not be, such as a kufi or a ghutra or a turban. However, for example, your ihram itself, if you take your ihram and you cover your head with it, which some people may do, thinking that it's permissible because of the heat, for example, then that is not permissible. That they actually put it on top of their head in contact with their head. That is also not permissible. Likewise, in a situation where if you arrive at your hotel, for example, and the time that you are going to do Umrah is later on in the day or in the evening, and now you have some time to rest, do not make the mistake of covering your head with your blanket also. That is also not permissible. Likewise, if you are taking a shower and then you may cover your head with the towel, for example, that is also not permissible. There's a difference between drying your hair coming out of the shower and actually putting the towel to be set on top of your hair, on top of your head. So that is not permissible. You using the towel to dry your head is fine. However, to put the actual towel and leave it on top of your head, that is not permissible. The second violation of Ihrām is to wear stitched garments. Yani, what is meant by that is mukhit. And what is meant by mukhit is stitched garments, however, that take the form of the limbs and that go around the limbs. This is forbidden for men in Ihrām. And what is meant by that is, for example, the thobe. You can see here, the thobe is a stitched garment and it covers the limbs. It goes around the limbs and around the body. This is not permissible. That it is actually stitched and connected all the way around. Unlike the Ihrām, which is open. Once you open it, it is completely open. And you will have to tie it in order for it to be together. However, if you have an Ihrām that is completely stitched and not open, then that is also not permissible. That it takes the form of your body, that is not a permissible type of Ihrām to wear. It must be open. And as we'll get into it later on, that you're allowed to hold the Ihrām up with a belt and the like. However, if there are those type of Ihrāms out there that are actually stitched all the way around, then that is not permissible to wear, and one should not purchase that type of Ihrām. Likewise, trousers or pants are not permissible. Underwear or boxers is not permissible. Socks, whether they are leather or regular socks, is not permissible. Sandals that cover the ankle, that go above the ankle, are not permissible. Likewise, shoes, wearing shoes is not permissible. So all of these things that cover completely are not permissible. Likewise, gloves without necessity. So if someone has some sort of illness, then it's okay that they have to wear some sort of gloves for their hands or even for their feet. Certain socks, if it's medical, then it's permissible. However, otherwise, it is not permissible. Likewise, the case where it would be permissible for a man, for example, to wear also trousers is also if they cannot afford it. If they cannot afford at all to wear an Ihrām and all they have is trousers, then in that case, they're also allowed to wear trousers. And likewise, if they cannot get a hold of sandals that do not cover the ankles, and then they are also allowed to wear leather socks in that case. Now, some misconceptions, or a lot of times people ask these questions. So if I'm not allowed to wear, stitched clothing or things that go around me, then does that mean I cannot wear, for example, a watch on my wrist? Or is it not permissible for me to wear a ring, for example? The answer is yes, it is permissible. It is permissible for you to wear a watch. It is permissible to wear a ring. It is permissible to wear glasses. Whether they are regular glasses or whether they are sunglasses. It is also permissible to wear a pouch like a fanny pack across the chest or across the waist. It is also, or even over the shoulders. It is also permissible to wear, to tie the izar in order to keep it, keep it tight and from preventing it from falling down. It is also permissible to use a belt, or the money type of belts that have pockets that you'll see they sell at the miqat. You'll see if you stop at any of the mawaqit, then you'll be able to purchase them. Usually white in color, and they're a belt, and at the same time you're able to put your phone and your wallet and things like that in there. That is also permissible to wear. Likewise, it is permissible to use pins. For example, if you find that it is hard to keep up your izar, and you want to use a pin so that it doesn't keep falling off of you, then that is also permissible, because that is not stitched. That is not stitched. But if you don't have a need for that, then it's better to stay away from it and wear the ihram the correct way. And so when the ulama mentioned that the izar, when they are describing the izar that is to be worn for Umrah and Hajj, meaning the bottom portion and the top portion, when they are describing it, the rida and the izar, and they say غير مخيط. غير مخيط, meaning non-stitched garments, is what is to be worn for Hajj and Umrah. Then what it does not mean that the ihram cannot be actually made out of stitching. What is meant by that is it's not mukhit, meaning it is not stitched all the way around to fit your limbs. To fit your limbs, just like the other garments that we mentioned, a thobe or a t-shirt, right? Shorts, boxers, anything like that. It's stitched all the way around to fit your limbs. However, the ihram is not. The ihram is not. So that concludes the ahkam regarding the ihram for the men. So those violations are to be paid attention to by the men, in that they differ from the women. So these ahkam that were just mentioned are pertaining to the men and specific to the men, and do not apply to the women. And so these two are two violations that are often neglected or not paid attention to, or also people tend to forget them. And so it is important to pay attention, especially the one with regards to covering the head. It is easily forgotten, so do your best to remember not to cover your head, and likewise to stay away from the rest of the mahdurat. That concludes this session. Stay tuned for the next session, which will be the mahdurat, the violations specific to the women. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.